Leonardo DiCaprio.
Miss Anne Hathaway.
Meryl Streep, the Iron Lady.
Alan Arkin in Little Miss Sunshine.
Kevin Costner.
Yes.
The King's Speech.
Birdman.
I'm Connor Old, and welcome back to another episode of Redoing the Oscars. And in this week, we're going to be talking about the year 2009, the Best Director category, and why I think Quentin Tarantino should have won for Best Director. But if you're new to the series, welcome. What I do every single week is talk about a nominated person in either an acting category or directing or picture, and talk about why I think they should have ultimately beat the eventual Oscar winner. What if we were to redo the Oscars and change things up? How would that affect their careers? Did the Academy ultimately get it right at the time? Is this more of a personal preference or a historical correction? We talk about that. I also like to give an unnominated pick, someone who wasn't nominated for the Oscars but maybe should have, and maybe even should have won. Just gives us an opportunity to talk about and celebrate some of the movies that maybe get nominated every single year but we don't think about in the history of the Oscars, just because they don't have that ultimate win, that ultimate check beside their name. They don't have the Oscars. So what if 15, 16 years out, we redo things, we take a look at the Oscars again. How would we do things differently? How would I do things differently? And taking a look back and see, did the Academy get it right? They don't always get it right. That's the kind of point of this series, but we try to be objective as well too, with my personal preference versus what actually did end up happening. But what we also like to start every episode with is some Oscars context. So let's jump into that right now. Talk about the 2009 Oscars. This was, in my opinion, seen as the Avatar versus Hurt Locker series. And the way I've always understood this from a historical point of view is that this is the year the Oscars became indie. The year the Oscars became insular, the year the Oscars became separated and out of touch from the general public. Now, that may be too much to place on this one year, and we knew that the Oscars was definitely going to decrease as a show because of cable networks and things like that, but this is representative, I think, of the modern day Oscars, or at least the Oscars that we've seen since the 2010s. I think with the expansion of the Academy in the 2020s, it's gotten a little bit better, but the 2010s was defined by the Academy essentially being really out of touch with what the general public likes. Now, that's not to say they didn't reward any great movies, but it is an indication that they were out of step with what the general public was appreciating. And I think the classic example is between Avatar and Titanic. 1997, Titanic had a turbulent production, comes out, becomes the highest grossing movie of all time, from James Cameron, wins Best Picture. Then, 12 years later, Avatar comes out. It's the highest grossing movie of all time, beats out James Cameron, revolutionizes 3D filmmaking, and inspires a seemingly never-ending supply of special effects-driven summer blockbusters. And yet, it doesn't win. What does it lose to? It loses to a kind of smaller film, a film that premiered at a festival the year before and grew in estimation, from a filmmaker whose career was kind of not in the best place and had that narrative factor of a comeback. And so it was a representation of a small group of people who maybe didn't really like the special effects movies that the general public was appreciating and liked more of these serious dramas that also has this narrative factor of, let's go with the small movie beating out the bigger movie. How exciting would that be? Let's go with, the personal behind the scenes battles between the filmmakers of the two films that were once married. Let's go with the kind of indie, insular festival movie versus the big mainstream blockbuster. Now, I'm not saying that if Avatar ends up winning Best Picture, that the Academy would have been saved and they would have had the same amount of viewership and whatnot. But it is, I think, a prime example of the audience flocking to one movie and liking it and going back again and loving it, just like they did in 1997 in Titanic. But in 97, the Academy agreed with that. But in 2009, the Academy didn't and went with The Hurt Locker, which wasn't only, like a decent hit. It was not a hit at all. It was one of the lowest grossing and still is one of the lowest grossing Best Picture winners of all time at the box office. So I always think about this year, I think about that kind of a split of what the Academy could have been or what it didn't, but that kind of shift in taste of maybe what this group likes versus what the general public likes. But are we talking about either of those films today? Not really, because my alternative nominated pick for the Best Director category, not Best Picture, but Best Director, is Quentin Tarantino for Inglourious Basterds. And he has won an Academy Award before, which is why I think he ultimately wasn't even in consideration for this category. But I think that's a bit of a shame. And I do think that him winning a Best Director prize would be a significant deal for him and also for his legacy. Now, I know some people like to talk about this on the acting side of things. I actually don't really think about this in terms of acting. You know, some people say, oh, she won just a supporting actress Oscar. She now needs to win a lead actress Oscar to define herself as a mainstream leading lady, a movie star, let's say. I don't really always think about that. I think if you win even a supporting acting Oscar, you're an Oscar winner, and that's a big deal. But I do think for someone like Quentin Tarantino, who has an Academy Award, a couple now, for writing, but at this time he'd only had the one for writing, I do think it would have been a sign of kind of evolution if he were to win for Best Director. That is the ultimate prize as a director, as someone who's been directing all of his scripts now for, 20 years, although this year that will be changing, which I'm excited to see. But I think it's also, it would be an acknowledgement of his leveling up within this movie, which I do think is his best film, which is something to say from one of our premier, most iconic and most influential and best filmmakers of the last 30 years. That this is his premier achievement, that this is his masterpiece. And the fact that he was nominated, but ultimately didn't actually win the Oscar was a disappointment. Because he's mostly known, yes, as a writer, but this has more than just writing to it. Of course, the movie has great dialogue. It does have a great screenplay, iconic lines. It has this labyrinthian structure that he's so well known for. With a movie like Pulp Fiction, this movie also has these intertwining characters and these all different great ensembles and stories within stories. That's so exciting during this World War II period, of course, paying homage to so many of the great kind of 50s and 60s movies that he grew up with, like The Great Escape or The Dirty Dozen. Of course, there's some inspiration there as well. But it's more than just the dialogue. It's more than just this great, mystery kind of a script. You think about his ability to control tone and control tension. I think that's what's so critical about this film, is that it feels like a roller coaster ride. At one part, you could be talking about, milk and a soliloquy on that, and then we can shift it on a dime and talk about, sheltering enemies of the state underneath your floorboards. And it's like fun and bubbly, and then it's tense, and it's like serious consequences. And then we can be joking about Italian accents, and then we can talk about, bloody murder. And every scene throughout the movie is a masterclass in tension and control of audience expectations. He does feel like he has the audience in the palm of his hands, and he's going to make you laugh and then immediately make you tense and nervous, and then tense and nervous, and then undercut something and give you relief. And it's this beautiful flow throughout the entire film of excitement and energy, and it's just an electric movie watching experience because you don't know what's going to happen next. And even still, rewatching the movie, there is this ability that he's able to bring throughout this film till today of unnervousness and ability to feel these different types of emotions constantly back to back to back. It feels like you're on a roller coaster, I think, in the best ways, where you're going up and down and going through turns, and it's so much fun that way. And then so much of the technical elements as well. It's not just that he has a master of the dialogue and the script and the tone and the tension and the atmosphere. And then it's like all these other technical elements too, more and more and more. You think of Bob Richardson's great cinematography, that's absolutely beautiful. You think about the production design, set design, and costumes that build out this world to be so believable and that can tell the story as well. And then the ultimate test, I think, maybe of his master as a director in this film is that some of its most iconic moments aren't pieces of dialogue, right? They are just, Melanie Laurent's character trying to not say anything out of line when she meets Hans Lauda, the people who, killed her family. Then you think about even just the holding up of the three in the basement. That's an iconic visual moment that they see that isn't necessarily a line of dialogue. Tarantino is just a master of tension, a master of control in every aspect of the entire film, which is what I think that makes it such an exciting roller coaster type of an experience that is full of great comedic moments, full of very, very tense moments of excellent acting, of masterpiece level script structure, as well as dialogue moments. But it's more than that. It's not just the writing, it's everything else and all the other aspects and, kind of departments that Tarantino has directing in the right lane here. And if you wanted to, let's say, reward a big mainstream movie that has resonance and you didn't want to give it to Avatar, maybe you could have given it to Inglourious Basterds, a movie that is from an iconic director that made $300 million, resonates still today. I think of the 2009 movies, Avatar, of course, is still popular. The Hurt Locker is still a well-respected movie, as is a movie like, Up. But Tarantino will be indebted for the rest of film history as one of its great directors. And this may be his masterpiece, so why not reward it? Then my alternative unnominated pick, a person that wasn't nominated for the Oscars that I think should have. Don't think it should have won. I think still Tarantino and Inglourious Basterds is my favorite movie from that year, but definitely should have been nominated. And that's Michael Bay in Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. Now, some people will be surprised by this, but longtime fans of this channel will know that I'm a big fan of Michael Bay. In 2022, Ambulance was my #1 movie of the year, and I do think that he is a masterpiece filmmaker and one of the best filmmakers still working today. Now, this episode is not going to get me a lot of social points in the sense that I'm taking away the first female director's best directing prize and then also, potentially nominating Michael Bay. Two controversial figures, I understand, in Tarantino and Bay. But at the end of the day, I try to give my personal taste on this episode, on this series. And, I was a boy and my kind of limited boy tastes, but ones that are deep and genuine and true and honest. I'm not trying to do this as a troll of any way. I do think that Bay's directing of Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen is top-tier blockbuster filmmaking and is an expert execution of what he is trying to go for, which is scale, which is spectacle. I think this movie has better special effects than modern movies today. I think that it's got some of the most dynamic and exciting action sequences of any movie in the 21st century. I think I feel this way similarly to many people feel about Mad Max Fury Road, where that's a movie where people don't talk about its story or care about its story. They care about how dynamic the action is. And I think Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen has that similar factor. It's like kind of criticizing a fireworks show for not having enough story. It's like you're going to a fireworks show for the fireworks. It's like saying, oh, I'm going to go to Kansas and I was disappointed in the pizza. It's like you don't go to Kansas for pizza. You go there for barbecue. You go to New York for pizza. So I'm not going to defend this as a feat of writing. Bay didn't write the script. This was during the writer's strike. So this movie has a very confusing and complicated plot for sure. But it is undoubtedly, I think, an evolution, especially visually, from the first movie. I think Bay understands with this franchise and why it's so popular. The majesty of seeing things crash into each other and blow up. In the same way little boys, when they have their two toys and they just smash them all together, Bay takes that idea and what it feels like to smash your toys together on a $200 million scale. With a mastery, in the same way Tarantino's a master in all the different departments, how great that movie looks visually, the dialogue, the editing. Well, Bay does it similarly here, just with different elements. The sound effects, the visual effects, the camera movement, and how slick and glossy it is. How these aren't necessarily realistic people, but they are beautiful to look at and godlike in many ways, and has this beautiful high-class sheen that I think makes everything look at the best version of it possible. Everyone looks the most beautiful, the most in shape. The colors are that much brighter and that shinier and that kind of almost jewelry-esque, gold-esque kind of a visual lens or flares and things like that. Nothing is realistic. It is heightened, but it is dramatic. It is epic. And I think on the very pure basis sense of how this movie looks, it is incredibly dynamic, relentless, and great and exciting to look at. And, is that not enough? Is it not enough to have some of the greatest visual effects and action sequences and spectacle you've ever seen on screen and have ever seen since, with a master of action, with a master of explosions like Michael Bay? I think it is, and I think we should reward that at the Academy for a total command of all the technical elements of a film. He is the ultimate craftsperson. The script necessarily isn't there, but in a way I would argue that because there's no clear script, you get more of Bay's personal sensibilities and his opinion about things like the military and heroism that's clear within the film. And in many ways, this is the most Bay movie ever because it's allowing the script to take a back seat and has some of his weird eccentricities, which are throughout all of his movies. There's a weird sense of humor for sure, childish in its own way, but still funny, appear within the film with a great ensemble and fascinating, exciting filmmaking. Yes, I do think Michael Bay is a great filmmaker, and he should have been nominated here for Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. But now to end off the episode, did the Academy get it right? Did they do the right thing by giving the Oscar to Catherine Bigelow? I'm going to say no. I'm going to say that it was a nice, good award at the time. It was probably worth it in time for a female director to finally win this award. It had been too long. That being said, I do think that it was a bit of a mistake from a large standpoint of view that the Academy gave a Best Director prize to a movie and a Best Picture prize to a movie that was so small and seen by so few number of people. And I don't even know if Hurt Locker is seen as Bigelow's best movie. I think people really love Point Break and Strange Days. And her modern stuff maybe hasn't aged the best because of people's complicated relationship with war and things like that. So I think that instead they could have given it to someone like a Quentin Tarantino, a great director who was controversial in his own right, yes, but Inglourious Basterds is still a movie that's memed today and seen and was also popular at its time. It was a way to, let's say, okay, we're not going to give the biggest movie of all time the award because we don't love it that much. We're not going to give it the award just because it's the biggest. So let's give a movie that did resonate, though, at the time. Inglourious Basterds, a legendary filmmaker. People wouldn't have been mad at that. Even if they gave Hurt Locker Best Picture and someone like a Tarantino Best Director, that I think that would have maybe aged a little bit better as well. So that's it for today's episode. Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts. Let me know if you have any thoughts in terms of who should have been nominated or who should have won in the Best Director category, or if you agree with my analysis that this was kind of a pivoting point within Oscars history. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. But that's about it. Until next week, stay tuned.